Hey guys, this is Jen, the founder of Iris Ministries, and I just wanted to hop on here and give you guys some background on me and let you know my testimony. Some of you might actually know me from my other brand, Live a Fast Life. That is what I've been doing for the past 4 to 5 years. Ever since God started this whole simplification process in my life. So you may know me from the tiny house world, from Tiny House Big Living on HGTV, and sort of through all of those outlets. But this is a whole new thing. This is really what I feel like God was moving me into for a while now, but especially just in the past month or so, it's really just been a major shift to put all of my energy now into Iris Ministries. So first of all, I want to welcome you here. Thank you so much for being here and for watching these videos. They have been a long time coming. I've known for quite a while that I have a lot of stories to share, and for a while I knew it wasn't really time to share them, so it wasn't an immediate thing. But now I know it's time to share them. So I have so much to share with you guys. I don't even know if this is going to be one video or if this is going to have to be split into two, but I know that the very first thing that I needed to do was to just kind of share my testimony with you, let you know the whole backstory. So again, you might know part of it from Live a Fast Life, but not really the whole faith part of it, the whole spiritual part of it. So I have my little notes right here in front of me because there's so much to talk about, but I'm going to try to get through it as quickly as I can, but still touch on everything that I think is important. So really the first thing that I just wanted to mention, because again, let me just say that I feel like my whole point of Iris Ministries is to make God relatable to like everyday regular people, because that's my own personal experience, that's what happened with me. So I do think that God wants people to know him. He wants people to know he's real. He wants people to know that he's there. And sometimes when you get caught up in all of the like religious stuff and just a lot of heavy things, it can be hard to really relate to it. So I hope that you can relate to my stories, because this is my life. This is actually what I've actually walked through. So really how I wanted to start out was just to let you know kind of where I came from as a child. So when I was growing up, I was Catholic just by association. My mother was Catholic, my grandmother was Catholic. My dad was really not religious at all. So we just kind of defaulted, I guess, to my mom's side of things. So both my sister and I grew up in Sunday school. We went to Mass on Sundays. We definitely didn't go every Sunday. I feel like we went fairly often. Went to Mass, went to Sunday school. My sister completed all of her, I don't even remember what they're called, sacraments, I think is what they're called. Catholics have this certain series of things that you have to go through. I'm not even going to try to explain why, but these things that you need to complete, and I didn't even actually finish those. I did my first communion, I did reconciliation. I don't think I ever did confirmation, and then again, I couldn't even tell you if there was supposed to be something after that. But really, I had zero interest whatsoever in church, religion, God. Had no relationship with God, that's for sure. Didn't really know who Jesus was, certainly never heard about the Holy Spirit. And I do just want to say, this is not me picking on Catholicism, this is not me picking on Catholics in any way. This is literally just me sharing what my experience was. So from my experience growing up in that setting, I didn't really feel like I had any kind of personal relationship. I feel like it was just a lot of routines and rituals. We did a lot of like standing up, sitting down, kneeling. We had all these things that we just repeated like robots that I can still to this day just kind of roll right off my tongue. All these different little like prayers and creeds that we said. And that was kind of it. So I probably did that, I guess, I'm imagining, until I graduated high school. I don't really remember. But that was it. And then when I went off to college in another state, I didn't really have much interest in it. It's funny because looking back now, I do remember that my college roommate and I want to say in our sophomore year, we had this idea. We were going to try out different churches, and she was Lutheran, so we were going to start out going to a Lutheran church so I could experience that, and then a Catholic church so she could experience that. And then our intention was to keep going and trying a bunch of different churches. And I don't remember us going beyond just those original 2 visits. I remember going to a Lutheran church with her and bringing her to a Catholic church, but that's all I actually remember. And it's funny because she commented on the standing up, sitting down, kneeling thing. She was like, how do you all know when to do this? And I said, I don't know. It's just like ingrained in our heads. So that was kind of the only blip on the radar really while I was in college. And I went to school for 2 years in another state. Then I came back home and I finished school back in Maryland where my family was. So at that time, again, still, I wasn't really, certainly not interested in church or God. I was just partying a lot, drinking, going out dancing, hanging out with guys, just kind of doing, I guess, what the average 21, 22-year-old was doing. And that was kind of a cycle that I had been going through. When I left home the first time, when I was 18, it was like this whole new world opened up to me because I was kind of like a goody-goody, I guess you would say, in high school, never really got in any trouble. Wasn't necessarily, I guess, what you would call like a nerd, but I wasn't really in the popular clique either. I just kind of had my own friends, and we just kind of sort of floated down the middle, and I talked to people from all the different cliques. So I was very lucky that I didn't really have any problems with like bullying or anything like that. But again, I just kind of did my own thing. And so then when I went away to school, it was like this whole new world opened up to me, and I realized like I don't have to go to class if I don't want to, and I can drink, and guys actually like me and pay attention to me. And because I hadn't dated in high school either, so I kind of went off the deep end, and that's all I really wanted to do was go to the beach, go to parties, have parties at our apartment, and my GPA reflected that. So at the end of the 2 years, I actually decided on my own to come back home and finish the last 2 years back in Maryland, just because I didn't really like where my life was going. So I actually made that decision. My parents didn't tell me to or anything like that. But then when I came back, I ended up moving into an apartment with my best friend from 4th grade, and it just started up again. So then we were living together, and then we started partying together and going out dancing 3 times a week and just drinking way more than we should, and doing the whole party scene. So that was kind of 21 to 24 or something like that. I ended up getting a really good job, and I got a great condo, an awesome condo, a nice car. I was doing really well. So my mom, who lived about probably 30 minutes away from me at that time, she started asking me if I would go to church with her. And my mom and I were absolute best friends. And of course, because I loved her, I was like, I'll go with you. But I had zero interest still. So we would go to mass, and I would just sit there and just stare out the window, and I'd be thinking about other things, and I would just want to hurry up and be done. And as soon as I heard them say their prayer at the end and say amen, I was like, sweet, we can go to lunch. So that was really all I cared about. Lots of times she would call and say she was on her way, or like she was getting close, and I would still be in bed. And she would come in and be all frustrated with me and say like, hurry up, get dressed, because we were going to be late. But I just had zero interest. So that's kind of where I came from. And really my whole state of being, really, ever since I was a child, was one of just a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry, a lot of fear. I feel like I definitely had a poverty mindset. Those were all kind of things that I feel like I had just sort of picked up in my environment growing up. So because of just, things with my parents and just dynamics in the house, I just sort of picked up this general sense of like being on edge, being afraid, being anxious about stuff, being worried about stuff, there never being enough, that general kind of thing. So really, again, like I said, when I graduated high school and went off to college, I was finding sort of this new freedom, I guess you could say, in like partying and things like that. I was finding validation in getting attention from guys because that was not something I had ever really received in high school. And I was just kind of really not sure of what my purpose was. I was kind of like flip-flopping around as far as what I wanted to study in school. And then even when I graduated with communications degree, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with that. So I just kind of fell into sales and marketing. And that's just sort of like where I was. So in 2001, 2002, like I said, I had this great job. I was working as a sales and marketing coordinator for a luxury home builder. And I had my own office, and just, it was a really nice job. I had great friends there. I really had, of course, zero interest in like houses and home building. But again, it's one of those things where I think that we just kind of, we just take what we can get. You're looking for a good job with benefits and money, and I wasn't really thinking about like what my purpose was or anything like that. I just kind of took the job. So at that job, though, my job description had grown so much since I had started there that I actually got to the point where I needed an assistant. So my boss let me hire an assistant. So we brought people in, and I actually interviewed them, and I felt like such a grown up because I wasn't being interviewed, I was actually interviewing people. And I chose this one girl, and she was probably, I don't know, in her early 20s. And at this point, I was only in my late 20s, so it's not like I was that much older than her. But she was a law student, and she was just kind of doing office assisting on the side until she went through school. So while she was working for me, she would keep talking every once in a while about this book that she was doing with her boyfriend. And then at the same time that that was happening with her, there was this other guy that worked upstairs in my office, and he had just sort of slowly been talking to me about God. So I'm sorry, I just looked down at my notes and I realized that was in 2004, 2005 is when that was happening. So I really had, up to that point, not really had any interest, and I wasn't really very open either to anybody talking to me about God. Because what I actually wanted to mention, what happened in 2001, 2002, was I was living in Texas at that time, and I was just working a part-time job at a cosmetic counter in a department store. And I was at lunch one day, just minding my business in the lunchroom, and one of the other cosmetic ladies who was older than me came over and sat down, and I could not even tell you how she started this conversation. I don't even know how we got on this subject, but she started talking to me about like God and Jesus. And I just remember I was getting like really freaked out, and I was like, this woman's weird. And she said something to me where she said, do you feel that feeling inside? Do you feel that inside? That's Jesus. And when she said that, I felt something inside. I felt like something was whatever, rising up or like bubbling up in me. And she freaked me out. And I don't even remember what I said to her, but I just remember I like got out of that lunchroom quickly, and I never talked to her about it again, never talked to anybody else about it again, and really just kind of forgot about it. So that was really the first like knock, I guess you would say. But again, I had no interest. I definitely didn't answer the door. And that was in like 2001, 2002. So flash forward back to 2004, 2005. And my assistant was talking about this book, and then this other guy is just slowly starting to talk to me about God. And he was married. He was not like trying to hit on me or anything. It was literally just friendly conversation. But it was the first time that I noticed I wasn't like shutting down and shutting him out. And I can't even say why. I just was, for whatever reason, more open at that point to letting him talk about it. And they weren't like huge in-depth theological conversations, but it was just enough that like I was starting to open the door just a tiny little bit. So finally I had heard my assistant talk so much about this book that I was like, okay, what is this book you're talking about? And like, what is it about? So she said it was called The Purpose-Driven Life, which you may or may not have heard about, but it was like a super popular book back around that time, and for decades actually. And she was like, you do this book and then you do this workbook at the same time, and you do like little exercises each day. And I just for whatever reason, was like, I think I want to do that. Like, that sounds interesting. So I called my mom and asked her if she wanted to do it with me. And of course, she was like overjoyed and wanted to do it for sure. So we bought the books and the workbooks and we started doing it. And the only way I can describe what happened with that book is that I feel like as I read it every day, it was like I was remembering things that I already knew, but I had somehow forgotten. That's that's what it felt like in my spirit. And it was, I can't even tell you again because it's been so long exactly what those things were saying, but it was, talking about God and us being created to have relationship with him and to live in purpose. And it was so weird because it felt familiar. It felt like it was something I knew, but I had just like forgotten along the way. And so I really got drawn in by this book, and I just wanted to make sure I did it every single day. And I actually went on a Caribbean cruise with a friend of mine right at that time period. And I was so into the book that I took the book on the cruise with me. And even though we were like on this cruise and I was, doing all these things on the boat and probably having drinks before I went back to the room at night, I still would make sure that when I sat down at night in bed that I would do these exercises. So at one point in that book, I'm sure it was probably towards the end, he addressed, okay, well, if this is something that's resonating with you and you want Jesus to be the leader of your life, pray this prayer. And it had, a little prayer on there, and ask him into your heart. And in that cabin on that cruise ship, while my friend was asleep right over there in her bed, I just like quietly prayed that prayer to myself, and that was it. And nothing earth-shattering happened. I didn't hear some loud booming voice from heaven. No lightning and thunder happened. It was just a regular moment. But I meant it when I prayed that prayer. So that was kind of the first step, I guess I would say, on the journey. And what's interesting is that for those of you that do already know Jesus and have already accepted him into your heart and asked him to lead your life, you already know this. For those of you that don't know him, I'll try to explain it as simple terms as I can, but really immediately what starts happening is he starts just changing you from the inside. So I just suddenly started to want to go to church. It was like there was this hunger in me, and I wanted to learn more, and I wanted to just develop that relationship, and just I couldn't get enough of it. So my mom, of course, was overjoyed, and I just knew I didn't want to go back to a Catholic church, though. And again, please know this is not me picking on the Catholic Church, but something in me just knew that wasn't going to really feed my spirit. And I wanted to go to a non-denominational, just Christian church. So there just happened to be this awesome church that was like 5 minutes from my condo. And it was, again, non-denominational, just Christian church. Ironically, I think that our pastor was actually Jewish. But I don't think he called himself a rabbi, but I'm pretty sure he was Jewish. But he was like this awesome, just friendly, very charismatic, just regular guy. And it was like, I couldn't believe everybody was going and like wearing shorts or jeans or whatever they wanted to wear. And they like played cool music, and it just felt completely different from what I was used to being church. So I started going there. My mom started going with me, and I just started so quickly just picking up momentum, and I started serving in the kids area, just checking kids in. I started, I was going every week with my mom, and then we decided to go on a women's retreat together. So sort of early on in my journey, we just went away on this women's retreat, and that was very, very good for my soul, because it was surrounding me with all of these other strong women of God, and I was developing this relationship with God myself, and just everything was new. Just even hearing the music and the way people worshiped, and it wasn't what I was used to with like singing hymns and everything being very just like quiet and low key. This was like joyful and exciting, and so I just very much felt like very alive. And this happened in 2005. So in 2006, I actually ended up moving back to North Carolina. And it was a major move because I didn't know anyone, and I moved to Charlotte, whereas I had gone to school in Wilmington. Um, but I just knew something in my spirit just told me like it's time to move. Everything in my life in Maryland was sort of all changing at one time. So my landlord of my condo, he decided not to rent it out anymore. He wanted to actually move back in. So I had to move. The job that I had was actually eliminated. They just decided to get rid of the position. So I was going to have to find a new job. All of my friends were sort of starting to peel off and get married. And I felt like what am I staying here for? And for me, that's extremely weird because I was actually very much a homebody and liked to be like close to family and needed like that security net. So the fact that I moved away from like my mom and my dad and my sister and my brother-in-law and just my nephew at that time, my niece wasn't born yet, but just the fact that I was moving so far away from that was like so out of character for me. But I just knew I wanted to move back to North Carolina, and I chose Charlotte because I felt like it was more of a it was a bigger city and there was going to be more job opportunities than Wilmington. So I moved to Charlotte not knowing a soul, not having a job. I just moved, and my mom came down and we scouted it out. We found a place for me to rent, and I just, started doing temp work right away, and I got a job with an event planning company and just did like some part-time event help and temp jobs just to get through until I was going to be able to find like an actual full-time job. So I knew that I also wanted to find a church as soon as I got to North Carolina. I was kind of like stuck in this love affair that I had with my church in Maryland because it was my first church that I went to after I was saved. So I felt like I'm never going to love another church as much as that church, and no one's going to compare to that pastor. And it just, I had like googly eyes for it. So when I first moved to North Carolina, I actually found a church right in the town I had moved to. And I went, and I remember I wasn't like totally in love with it. I just was kind of like, okay, it's fine, I guess. And it was the same concept. It was just a non-denominational, modern Christian church. And they gave me a DVD on the way out, and it was like part of their welcome packet. And I just took it home and put it away. And a couple of months passed, and I was kind of just getting settled in and starting to meet people. This was in the days of MySpace. So I was like starting to make some friends in the area off of MySpace and then actually hanging out with them in real life. And a couple of months went by, and I was like, okay, I really do want to go to church. Like I missed that part of my life. So I felt like the Holy Spirit just reminded me of that DVD and was like, watch that DVD you picked up. So I watched it, and something about just watching the pastor speak on that DVD made me want to give it a second chance. So I went back that following weekend, and that was it. It was done. Then I just loved the church. I felt so welcomed coming in. There were just so many people there that were just friendly and open and just normal people. And just they really brought me into this feeling of like being at home there and feeling welcome there. So I really just dived in there too, kind of like I did in Maryland. So I, started serving again in the children's area. I made sure I went every single week. I really started kind of getting into more like of their extra activities there. So if they would do like a school supply drive or like a food drive, I would always get involved in those things. They did a lot of stuff around Christmas to help the community, so I would always do those. And I just got really involved with that church, and quickly that kind of started to fill that need for me, not only for getting spiritually fed, but also because I didn't have anyone. I didn't have any family or friends in North Carolina, so they quickly started becoming my family, and I made a lot of friends through the church. So that was kind of the start of my move to North Carolina. But then what happened was, of course, I met a guy. Isn't that always the case? So probably about maybe 8 months after I moved to the Charlotte area, I met a guy, and we just quickly fell like head over heels in love. And what was interesting was that by this time I was actually 30 years old, and I hadn't really seriously dated anybody. Which was funny because it was actually the same with my mom. Her real first serious relationship was when she was 30 and she married my dad, and that was it. She did have some other boyfriends, and she actually had people propose to her, but she had turned those down. So I had dated and, had friends that I hung out with and stuff, but I had dated guys, but it never really gotten to the point where it was like super serious. And this was the first time was with this person, and we were just like we were done. That was it. We were going to get married, and we were going to have a family, and we just knew it, like that was that. So unfortunately, what ended up happening was I let that just sort of take over my life, and really God, church, Jesus, anything got pushed to the back, just all the way to the back burner. And that relationship started out great, and it ended up just slowly becoming more and more dysfunctional. He became more and more possessive and controlling, and so it actually ended up becoming an abusive relationship. And that is a whole nother topic that I'll probably talk about in some other videos, but it ran the course of what a normal abusive relationship does, which is it just kind of happens slowly over time, and it just sort of seeps its way in there. So it's never like just all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, why did this person just like haul off and push me? It was very subtle and very slow, and by the time that has started happening, it was like I was already fully in with this person, and he was living with me. I really had no qualms about him living with me at that point. My relationship with God wasn't even strong enough at that point, I think, for me to even like think, hey, maybe this isn't a good idea. Maybe this is not the way God wants me to live. But I just, he moved in with me because, again, that's just kind of what you do. And he had 2 small children, and they moved in with me. And it was very, very fast, which, again, is another red flag. But just how quickly everything changed. And he, in the beginning, would go to church with me. We even took the girls with us, and they would go to Sunday school. But I quickly found out that was kind of just a front, and that was kind of just something he was doing to just sort of placate me in the beginning and sort of win me over. Because then as time went on, it became really something that we argued about. So it just became something where like I would go to church once in a while when I could get there. But things were so stressful at home, and I was just always so worn out and exhausted from not knowing if he was going to be upset that day, or if we had just had a fight and he had screamed at me or whatever. I didn't really make it to church very much. So that part of my life just sort of got pushed to the back burner. So really that kind of went on for, oh gosh, like over 3 years. And it was just a lot of, again, what you always hear, the back and forth, and breaking up and getting back together, and breaking up and getting back together. And during that time in 2009, my father actually passed away from stage 4 cancer. So that was just a whole nother added level of stress that I went through. And my father and my ex were very similar. My father was not physically abusive, but he was very angry. He wasn't, verbally and emotionally abusive. And so he had that in common with my ex. And big shocker, we always end up, right, trying to fix what we didn't get to fix with somebody else. We try to fix with the next person. So of course, out of all the people on the earth, I picked this like carbon copy of my dad and was subconsciously trying to fix him and save him. So when my father passed away, that really pushed me back to my ex even more, because it was like I couldn't handle losing both of those male figures in my life at the same time. So I just kept going back to him, and it was just so drawn out and dysfunctional. And of course, the whole time when I would make it to church, I would always feel God calling me out of that relationship. I would feel him just quietly speaking to me while I was watching a sermon, or he would reveal something to me. He revealed just between him and I, he would just reveal things to me in my mind and in my heart about things that this person had lied to me about. And, just given me a lot of clarity, but I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to leave. He was all I knew. He was everything at that point, because I had really gotten so isolated that all of my friends had sort of dropped off because he just was controlling me so much that I was only like with him and his family. So even though I was hearing this and I knew that God had more for me and he didn't want me in this relationship, I didn't know how to live without it. So I kind of tried slowly over time to pull myself out of this relationship, and I finally did. Got myself out of it, or I should say God got me out of it. Um, and immediately I started going to this program at the church called CR, which stands for Celebrate Recovery. So it's this awesome program that you can go to at churches all over the country, and it's for all different types of stuff. So people go there for drug addictions, alcohol addictions, relationships, um, abuse, just all kinds of different things. So you go, and there's normally like a large group session in the beginning, and it's always in churches. So there's always like worship at the beginning, and then usually somebody gets up and speaks to the whole group, and then you break off into your small groups that are based on the different subjects. So then I would break off and go to the women's relationship group. And when I started going to that group, oh, I was a hot mess. I would cry all the time, and it was just it was so draining and so emotional. And for a while, my ex even would start showing up at CR, and he would go to the men's relationship group, and he was saying that he was trying to get better. And that's the thing, that's another consistent theme as well through the relationship. And again, I'll probably talk about this more because I am passionate about it, but it's not like I was just sitting around like, oh, he could do whatever he wants to me. We would have these conversations where I could genuinely see that he was struggling and that he didn't want to be that way, but he had grown up in a similar situation himself. And his father was very similar to that, just like I had grown up with the same thing. So I believed him at first when he was coming to CR. I thought that he was really trying to get better. It was a little hard for me because I didn't feel like I could concentrate 100% if I knew he was right there, like down the hall. But, for a while, I hoped maybe it would work. And then it became clear that, again, he literally was not in a place where he could follow through on anything. So even when he tried to go to counseling, he didn't follow through. When he tried to use medication to get better, he didn't follow through. When he tried CR, he didn't follow through. So I just knew as I was getting better and as I was healing and I was getting stronger, I knew like this is something that I just can't be a part of anymore. So really through that process is how God actually got me away from him for good. And it's funny because I feel like what the turning point for me was that I went on this mission trip, and it was my first mission trip ever. And I don't think I knew to pray this. I think the Holy Spirit gave me these words because I don't even know how I would have known to ask for this. But before I went on the mission trip, which was just a local mission trip, it was to West Virginia. And before I left, I just prayed and asked God that he would just close both of our mouths. I was like, just close my mouth, Lord, and close his mouth, and just hold our tongues, keep us quiet. Because what would happen is if one of us would be good and not be reaching out, then the other one would get weak and reach out. And it would just flip-flop back and forth. So I just asked God to just quiet both of us. And he did it. He totally did it. He kept us quiet. And the whole time I was away on this mission trip, which again was just in West Virginia, I didn't hear from him, and I didn't feel compelled to reach out to him. And it happened that whole time I was gone, and then even for a little while after I got back. So then by the next time I heard from him, enough time had passed that I had gotten strong enough that I was like, I don't have to answer. And that was the first time that I had ever been able to not answer him. And that just grew, that continued, and God grew that strength in me, where as more time went on, then and at first it would bother me. I mean, I'd still think about it, obviously, but I just mean I had enough restraint that I didn't answer. And then the more time that went on and the more times he would try to reach out, it got easier and easier and easier and easier and easier not to respond. So, and he was also directing my attention back to him. So I had started serving again, and like I said, I went on the mission trip and I got baptized, which was huge. again, as a Catholic, I had been baptized as a baby, but really the whole concept of baptism is that you're giving your life to Jesus, you're accepting him as your savior, you're asking him to make you clean. So I don't personally feel like that one when I was a baby like really took, because I'm like, I was a baby and how would I even know? Um, so it was very important for me to get baptized again, and I did that. And so really that was what was getting me back on track with him. So my relationship with him started, with God, started really growing again, and I feel like it was starting to pick up momentum after everything I'd been through with my dad passing away and with being with my ex. And I felt like things were just sort of starting to get going. I got a new job, and I was very happy with my coworkers there. I moved to a different condo um, that my ex did not know where I lived, so he couldn't come and contaminate that apartment with all his drama. And so I was very happy where I was at. And right around that time is when I found out that my mom had cancer. And that was a pretty devastating blow because we were best friends, and her diagnosis came in March of 2013, and she ended up passing away in September of 2013. So it was extremely fast. She literally almost had 6 months to the day from diagnosis to when she passed away. And that was hard just to watch somebody that you love go down so quickly, but also it was hard to watch her like literally run out of time in front of me, because there were a lot of things that she thought she was going to do, and just things that she thought she still had time for, and it was hard to watch. So that was really kind of the turning point for me. That was when everything sort of changed for me, is when she passed away. Because probably any of you out there that have gone through something extremely traumatic, extremely painful like that, you know that you kind of feel like you have this choice afterwards. Like, how am I going to react to this? Like, I can go this way and I can just spiral downward and just let this absolutely just like drain the life out of me, or I can go this way and I can do something and use this for good, or let God use this for good. So that's kind of the point I was at when she passed away. Was I felt like I was physically and emotionally just drained, because I had been through all of that stuff back to back. It was just my ex, and then my dad passing away, and then my mom passing away. And so all of that took this huge toll on my body. I ended up with advanced adrenal fatigue, which is basically just when your body gets stuck in the fight or flight response. So because I had been through so much trauma and so much stress just continually, my body got stuck at that spot, and it just always was in fight or flight mode, like constantly 24/7. So it affected every part of my body, and I literally just felt like my body was falling apart. And then I was just obviously just like spiritually and emotionally depleted. I had just been through so much loss and just so much stress. And I really just hit this point where I was like, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I I always say, like, I feel like I just give the credit to God, because I don't know where any of this came from. But he just somehow started walking me through this idea of like, okay, it's time to just streamline your life. It's time to simplify your life and just like cut away all the extra. And I'm kind of skipping over some other stuff here, but I'll talk about some other things in other videos, because again, like I said, there's so much to say, and I know this is already getting to be a long video, but I appreciate it if you're still listening. But I had also gone through like some spiritual warfare in there, which I didn't even, again, at that time know what that was. But I had been kind of starting to go into a really dark place, and I was starting to act in ways that weren't like me at all. And I was starting to kind of just retreat and again go into things that I had no business going into. And at that point, I feel like is when just God kind of like scooped me up out of that. And thankfully, he introduced me to my best friend, and I moved in with her. We became roommates, and I started doing a lot of like dog walking and pet sitting, and when my mom passed away is when I actually decided to quit working a full-time job and just focus on my writing, because I had known since 7th grade that writing was my gift. I knew that writing was my passion, but I had always sort of talked myself out of it and always told myself like, well, that's not like a real job and I need to do that on the side. But when she passed away, and again, I saw like her run out of time, and I saw how she had, like, she would be the first to tell you, I'm not saying this like behind her back or anything, she let fear hold her back from living her life. So I just knew I didn't want to do that. And I wanted to step out and take a chance. So I started doing my writing full time and the pet sitting on the side. And that was going really well. And I was finally starting to address some of my health issues. I was going to a naturopathic doctor because I had just run into complete dead ends with the regular medical community. So I started going to a naturopath, and that's really kind of when things started to change. So that was when I was introduced to the idea of tiny houses and downsizing. And so that's kind of where the whole concept of like simplifying my life came from. And I ended up things started just moving quick. And I ended up getting rid of 80% of my belongings. And you may already know, I moved into a 160 square foot tiny house. And at the same time that I was doing that, I was just cleaning up like what I put in my body and what I put on my body. So I started paying attention to the food I was eating. I started eating cleaner. I started getting rid of all my toxic products that I was using and just trying to use as natural products as possible. And then at the same time, I was leaning in and I was letting God do all of this emotional and spiritual healing in me. And it's funny because I joke and I say like God has saved me thousands of dollars on a counselor, but he seriously did, because I would just spend like days in my bedroom, which I had to anyway because my adrenal fatigue was so bad that it was keeping me in bed. But I think that God was using that on purpose to have that time with me. So I would just spend like all day in there, and I would just be praying and journaling and reading. And that's really when the intimacy with God started. I would say that's when like my relationship with God started, where he stopped just being kind of this like far away thing, but he became an actual like father, and he became an actual like person, to use I guess the best word, that I could talk to, and that he like cared and he wanted to heal these things in me. So I'm not going to get too in depth in that in this video, but he just started healing me of a lot of things that I've been carrying around from my dad, from my mom, from my ex, from my childhood. And it was necessary because to heal my body fully and to have my adrenal fatigue fully be better, I needed to address it both from the physical and from the emotional and the spiritual. So that was kind of all happening while I was also downsizing, and while I was also, you know, cleaning up my diet and doing all of these different parts. They all just kind of came together. So I ended up moving into the tiny house, and my body started getting better. And I just started living this simpler, cleaner life. And all I can say is that I just felt like so much freer and so much lighter. And really during that time is when I could start hearing from God more clearly. And I started to really just kind of feel myself coming alive inside and feel my spirit coming alive. So I ended up actually having to move out of the tiny house, which again, such a long other story, but you may already know that if you have followed my tiny house journeys. So the tiny house ended up falling apart, long story, and I had to move out of there. So what I ended up doing after that was I moved back in with my roommate for a short period of time, but then I knew I wasn't going to be able to stay there long term because she had other plans, you know, in her life. And so I just prayed and I said, God, I believe you're going to send me somewhere, and I just need you to tell me where. Like through that process of simplifying, I just somehow, again, only can give credit to God, that I just somehow started to just have this feeling of like, you know what, I'm going to trust him to direct me and guide me, because I just sort of kind of took my hands off of it, like after my mom passed away, and I was like, I'm done, like this is not working. I need you to take over. And so he was the one that was leading me through everything. So even when it came to something like, well, where am I going to live? I was like, I'm just going to put it in his hands. So I just prayed and, said, God, I just need you to show me where you want me to go. And one day when I was first waking up early in the morning, he just dropped this person into my mind. And she was somebody that I knew from church. We were actually in a life group together. And I just knew, like, I'm supposed to reach out to her. So I had texted her and said, like, would you have any interest whatsoever in having a roommate? And she responded and she was like, this is crazy that you're saying that, because I was just thinking that I need to get a roommate, and like I would love to talk to you about that. So we got together and we talked, and she ended up telling me she thought that I was the answer to her prayer, because she was looking to have somebody kind of help her along in her spiritual journey. And here she was the answer to my prayer, because I actually needed a physical place to live. So it was a great situation, and I moved in with her. And at this point in time, God was doing a lot in my life, in my private life between him and I, to get me dependent on him and get me to learn to trust him. So all of that is going to be really the basis for my next book, and it's going to be a whole bunch of separate videos. So again, I can't get into like the details about that, but he was just walking me through a lot of stuff, learning to be completely dependent on him. So when I moved into this new apartment, I knew that it was only going to be by the grace of God that I could pay for the rent at this place, because it was a nice apartment. And I was not working a traditional job. I knew God was telling me specifically not to work a traditional job. So it wasn't just like I was sitting around going, oh, well, God didn't tell me to do that. He actually told me not to do that. So I was kind of in this interesting, challenging place with him, as far as trying to be obedient and trying to follow him and learn to develop trust and faith in him. And so I was only doing like writing jobs and pet sitting, and I knew it was going to have to be like a miracle for me to be able to pay for this apartment. But I trusted him, because I know he told me to go there. So for the first like 2 or 3 months, everything was fine. The money always came. Something always happened that it always worked out. And then by like the 3rd or 4th month, something just happened. Well, nothing happened, I guess I should say. And I wasn't going to have the money. And I admit I put it off, because I don't like conflict, so I didn't want to say anything. But also I was still believing till the last minute that he was going to provide, because what had happened when I was living with her was my relationship with God really, really got deep. That's where it first really started to get a lot deeper. I would spend every day in my bedroom at that apartment, just on my knees for hours. And I started like worshiping in my bedroom, which I'd never done before. Like I'd only ever done that in church. In fact, I didn't even raise my hands in church. So I would just start like singing in my bedroom, singing worship music, and I just was reading so much and just journaling. And I had a whole crazy experience, which again, another video, where I had sort of gone into the New Age by accident and thought it was all the same thing. And oh boy, do I have a testimony there. But that was where that happened, was when I was in that apartment. So I knew like I was where I was supposed to be, but I didn't understand why the money wasn't coming. So when I finally let her know that I wasn't going to have the money to pay for rent, it was not a great situation. She was not happy. And basically I just had to leave, like immediately. So that was a huge surprise, just having to leave on a dime like that. I didn't have like anything packed. I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't have any money, obviously. So what happened was I, of course, like melted down like any normal person would for 20 minutes or so. And my friend came over to help me move, and she was just helping me like hurry up and put my stuff away and get packed up. And what's interesting is during that time period, like as we were just packing stuff up and taking it up and down to her car, I just had this complete calm come over me, and I stopped crying and I stopped like freaking out. And my friend even said to me, something about like, well, what's going on? And I said, I actually just felt this total peace coming over me. And we packed up my stuff, and coincidentally, she was actually leaving her condo for good with her husband, and they were going to start traveling full time. And she just happened to have her condo for 2 more weeks. And she even told me as we were driving back over, she was like, I didn't understand why I couldn't leave my condo on the day I wanted to leave. Like, it made no sense to me, like why we ended up having to have this condo for 2 more weeks when we were going to be gone. And she said, now I understand why, because you were going to be there. And it was this awesome 2 bedroom, 2 bathroom apartment on the lake with a pool. It was like amazing. Of course, it was empty, but I didn't care. I took my little inflatable bed over there and my little table and set up a little makeshift desk so I could keep working. And I just immediately from that day started living at her condo. And when I was standing in her kitchen that night, I opened my phone. We had just gotten settled, and I was still so like overwhelmed and just exhausted. And I opened my phone and I had this email, and this will be something that I talk about in, I'm going to do like some God 101 basic videos, because again, I want to make all of this as easy as possible for everyone. So I'm going to make a video about like how you hear from God. But one of the ways that he will speak to me is he'll talk to me through like an email or through a devotion. And I just opened it up and I got this email, and it was like exactly about like what was happening. And he was basically saying in this devotion to just trust that you were right where you were supposed to be. And as I was reading it, I felt him saying to me, you're right where you're supposed to be. This is part of it. You're just going to have to trust me now. And so I, again, just had this peace come over me. And that's kind of what started the crazy cool journey that I've been on now for the past 2.5, almost 3 years, where he just had me live this completely nomadic life where I've just been totally dependent on him. And I'm certainly not the only one to ever do this. He's actually put me in touch personally with at least 2 other people that I know that have done this as well. There's like stories in the Bible about it. There's like, it's all kinds of other people have done this before, but I didn't know enough about the Bible or God or any of that to know that anybody else was doing this. So when he asked me to do it, it was like really scary and really crazy. And I mean, I think anybody would have that human reaction where you just feel like, oh my gosh, like we are taught and trained to be self-sufficient, figure things out, figure it out yourself, plan ahead. And here he's telling me I have to do the opposite of that. I can't go get a regular job. I need to depend on him and trust him and just go when he says go and just do what he says to do. And it was exhilarating, like a roller coaster, but also like extremely scary. But I wanted, again, I think I had just developed such a trust and such a relationship with him, and I still was so hungry for more that I was like, what do I have to lose? I mean, what do I have to lose? I'm literally like homeless at this point. I don't have any money. I don't know. And it was like, I knew he was with me though. And I knew he was saying like, trust me, just watch me work, give me space to work. So that's what I did. And it's just started this amazing journey where every time a place that I was at would be coming to an end, he would just line up the next place. And it was like when I needed to be out of my friend's condo, when it was time to leave her condo, a person I hadn't talked to since I was like 20 years old reached out to me on Facebook, and she needed help with decluttering and organizing. She had been through all of this awful stuff in her own life, and she had ended up just totally disorganized, and it was overwhelming her. And she said, but I can't pay you. Like, I wish I could pay you to come out here. And I just knew, in that moment I'm supposed to go help her. And I said, you don't have to pay me, but can I just stay at your house? Because I don't have any money for a hotel, because she was in another state. And she was like, absolutely, you can stay here. And she said, and I'll even pay for your food as a thank you gift. So I just, the day that I was supposed to be out of my friend's condo, packed up my stuff, packed up my dogs. We drove to this other state, and I stayed with her for about a week, I think it was, and helped her like literally transform her environment. Went from just chaos to being completely organized and clean and peaceful again when I left. And it was amazing, because it was like, again, where God was providing a place for me and meeting my physical needs, but he was also using me to then meet her needs and to help her just have this jump start to get back into regular life and to sort of come out from that chaos she had been in. And so it just became this thing where it was just, he would lead me from place to place, and I would do speaking engagements. That's when my whole speaking career started with tiny houses. I started going to festivals. I started speaking at healthy living festivals. I ended up speaking at a Christian women's conference. I would visit like friends and family in between there. And then I would do pet sits and house sits and stay at people's houses. And he would just line it up perfectly where there was just always somewhere to go. And he would always provide food, and he would always provide gas. And again, you know, if you're familiar like with the story of Elijah in the Bible, it was like he literally would use other people or, you know, circumstances, or provide like free, like since I was a blogger, I would get like free protein powder in the mail the exact day that I had just run out or something like that. Like he was always just using whatever, you know, was at his disposal to provide for me. But it was up to me to be faithful and to trust. And believe me, it was not easy. I am not going to sit here and say, oh, it was like nothing, and you know, you should trust God more. I was a basket case most of the time. I got good at it. I got better at it, and I actually started to really enjoy it. But there were plenty of times where I would freak out. I'd cry. I'd scream at him. I'd yell at him. I'd call people and, oh, please pray for me, whatever. There'd be times when I'd be like, how am I going to eat tonight? Like, where am I supposed to stay tonight? But what was cool was that I felt like I was supposed to lean into that. So whereas most people would feel like you want to hurry up and like fix your situation and make it better, I felt like I was supposed to lean into the hardship because he was trying to teach me something in it, and he was trying to heal me, and he was trying to grow me in it. So that really has been my life since June of 2017. And really where I'm at now, it's funny because I thought that when I got to that point after I simplified my life and I saw how different my life was, I thought that was the end goal. I thought that was my purpose. I thought that was what he had been moving me towards. So that's why I started the website, and I wrote a book, and I was speaking about it. And although I do still think it's important, and I do still think it's a message that he wants me to share, and I will still incorporate that into this ministry, that ended up just being the means to an end. So what I ended up finding out was that when he simplified my life and he stripped away all that stuff and he got me physically healthier and spiritually healthier, then what ended up happening was then I became clearer to be able to hear his voice, hear his direction, and see what his true purpose for me was, which is this ministry, which is helping people know he is real, helping people hear his heart, hear his voice, to trust him more, to come into this deeper relationship with him, because I am a prime example of somebody that came from zero relationship with him. I'm not some person that came out of the womb being all religious, and I hate the word religious, by the way, because that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about relationship with God, not religion. But like, I had no interest either. I thought churchy people were weird. I thought that they were like, I don't know. I just thought they were weird, and I thought it wasn't me, and I don't consider myself a churchy person. I love God, and I have a relationship with God, and that is what he's calling me to, is he wants me to use just my stories, just my life. That's what I mean. It's not, I hope it's not intimidating for you, because it's just my life. And I have these crazy stories that I have been sitting on for the last 3 years. So I have a lot to share, but they're just things I couldn't have made up in a million years. Things that, again, just make you think like, there's just no words. Like, there's no way to explain these things other than that God arranged them. And so I have these cool stories to share, and I figured out that that simplifying process that I went through was just a means to get me here to this point, where I can share my relationship with God. I can share his heart and his voice with people. I can share the lessons I've learned. I can share the encouragement I've gotten along the way, the little gems of wisdom I've picked up along the way. Just share as much of that with you as I can, and that was the end goal. This is the end goal. This was the purpose all along. And so while that simplifying part was important, and I do believe that everyone can get some benefit out of that. Everyone can get some benefit out of simplifying their life. That this is actually where I was meant to be. And I feel like that when you cut out all that noise, cut out all that extra, you will then be able to hear where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be doing. So that's kind of where I'm at now. God's done a lot of work in me since the beginning of this year, because I just knew that, He wanted to make sure that I was free of all of that old baggage, all of the old stuff. He's been doing a really deep work in me just to kind of get me clean, I like to say, get me free so that I'm able to share all of this with you. So I know that that was probably like almost an hour. So I don't even know if anybody's still watching, but I just wanted to try to get out as much of that as I could, because it's been such an exciting journey. It's been such a crazy journey. And I'm so excited about what's to come. I've got like 5 books in my head that have to come out. I've probably got like 100 videos that need to come out. And I'm going to also try to be doing like a workshop here very, very soon to get this also going in the real world outside of the internet. So I'm just excited because there's a lot to come with this. And I hope that even though this was a lot in one little video, I'm hoping that maybe something in it would resonate with you. And again, like I said, I have a lot of parts of that that I'm going to elaborate on more. I'm not sure if I'll elaborate too much on the domestic violence stuff, but I definitely am going to be doing videos about the spiritual warfare, about how to hear God's voice, about how to discern His voice, discerning your purpose, and then, like I said, share a lot of my little stories with you. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I thank you so, so much for listening, for being here. Please subscribe if you want to hear all of these things I have to share. Share this with people. And I just look forward to getting to know all of you guys too, and sort of forming a little community here. So thanks for being here, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.